The small diner on the corner of Maple Street was the kind of place people forgot about. The neon sign flickered at night, barely giving enough light for anyone to notice it was open. But every morning, before the sun rose, a young black woman named Mia would tie her apron tight, tuck her scarred cheek behind her braids, and walk through that squeaky door to start the coffee pot. Mia's scar was the first thing people saw, a long, jagged mark running from her ear down to her jaw, like a cruel reminder that some pain never fades. She'd gotten it when she was just 16, in a fire that took her mother and the only house she'd ever known. She'd survived by climbing through a burning window. It was the window's broken glass that left its mark on her. People asked her about it sometimes, but most just stared, then turned away, pretending they hadn't been curious. This morning, she stood by the window, watching the rain tap softly on the glass. She pressed her hand against her scar, feeling the rough skin under her fingertips. No one else was there yet, just the old cook, Sam, who hummed an off-key tune in the back kitchen. Mia liked this hour, when she could pretend the world was kind and no one mocked her or whispered when she walked by. But today would not stay quiet. A group of young men came in, their jackets dripping with rainwater, their voices loud and careless. They sat in the booth closest to the window, so she could hear every word. One of them, a tall man with cruel eyes, leaned back and stared straight at her face. "Hey, sweetheart," he called, tapping the side of his own cheek. "What happened there? Your boyfriend get angry, or did you fall on your face?" The others laughed. It was the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than any blade. Mia felt her hands tremble as she gripped her notepad. She forced her feet to move, step by step, to their table. She took their order, staring at her shoes so they wouldn't see the tears forming in her eyes. When she turned to walk away, she heard one of them whisper, "Should have stayed home." Scarface. Another burst of laughter followed her back behind the counter. Sam peeked out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He saw the look on her face and sighed. He'd seen this before. He'd seen it too many times. But Sam was old and tired, and he knew his words wouldn't stop the world from being cruel. So he just gave her a nod that said, "I see you, kid. I see you." And sometimes that was enough. Mia poured the coffee with shaky hands. She imagined what it would be like if she could be invisible, if she could just disappear and live a life where no one looked twice at her scar. She imagined her mother sitting beside her, telling her she was beautiful, that the scar was proof of her strength. But her mother was gone, and the only thing she had left was this tiny diner and the people who came in to throw their words like stones. Then, as the bell above the door jingled, everything changed. A man stepped inside, rain dripping from his black coat. His hair was longer than you'd expect, his shoulders slightly hunched as if he carried the weight of the world with him. He took off his sunglasses and looked around the diner with kind eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. When his gaze fell on Mia, it paused, held steady. She didn't recognize him at first. To her, he was just another customer, another pair of eyes to judge her face. But he did not look away. Instead, he smiled, a small, warm smile that made her feel seen for something more than her scar. He sat at the counter, just a few feet from where she stood frozen. The group of young men noticed him too. They didn't realize who he was. They just saw a man alone, with a quiet presence. They kept laughing, kept tossing insults her way, louder now, trying to get a reaction from the stranger. Mia forced herself to move closer to him. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice so soft he had to lean in to hear her. "Coffee?" He nodded. "Yes, please." His voice was gentle, patient. "And your name?" She hesitated. No one asked her that. They just called her Waitress. Or "Hey you, it's Mia," she said, almost afraid to speak it out loud. Double quotes Mia. He repeated, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "I'm Keanu." She laughed under her breath, like Keanu Reeves, she teased, trying to hide her nervousness. He grinned, exactly like him. Behind her, the young men snorted. One of them muttered, "What a joke. Who does he think he is?" But the stranger didn't react. He just sipped his coffee and kept his eyes on Mia, like she was the only person in the room. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. his fingers tapping the side of his mug. "Since I was 18, she said. Needed the money. It's not much, but it's mine." She almost didn't say the last part. It felt foolish, too small to matter, but his eyes made her feel brave enough to share the truth. "Sometimes the small things are the strongest," he said, his voice so calm it almost made her forget the cruel laughter behind her. "You must be strong, Mia." Her eyes watered, but she blinked it away. "I try." Then he did something that made her breath catch. He reached across the counter and gently touched her scar. Just for a second, there was no pity in his eyes, only recognition, a flash of something that made her heart pound in her chest. The group of young men had fallen silent now. They watched the two of them, confused. The tallest one stood up, his chair scraping the floor. "Hey man, you're not from around here, are you? We don't talk to girls like her. She's got a face that makes babies cry." He laughed, waiting for the stranger to join in. But Keanu didn't laugh. Instead, he turned, his eyes suddenly sharper, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Maybe you should go," he said. The man frowned. "Who do you think you are?" And that's when it happened, the moment that changed everything. One of the men looked closer, his eyes widening as realization hit him. He whispered something to his friend, and they all turned pale at once. Mia didn't understand until she saw the cook, Sam, peeking out again, his eyes wide with shock. "Holy hell," Sam muttered under his breath. "It's really him." Mia looked back at the man in front of her, the kind eyes, the gentle smile, the way he looked at her scar like he'd seen it before. And in that instant, she knew this wasn't just any stranger. It was Keanu Reeves, the real Keanu Reeves. And he knew her scar, but how? She felt her knees weaken, questions spinning in her mind. The laughter had stopped. The diner had fallen into a hush so deep you could hear the rain against the glass again. Keanu didn't take his eyes off her. He seemed ready to speak, to tell her something that would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself, about her past, about her worth. But the moment stretched on, heavy with things unsaid. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. Who was she to him? Why did he look at her like that? And what secret did this scar carry that she'd never known? And as the door swung shut behind the young men, slipping away into the rain, Mia knew her life was about to change forever. The diner felt different now. It was like the walls themselves were listening, holding their breath to see what would happen next. Mia stood frozen behind the counter, her hands still wrapped around the empty coffee pot. Keanu watched her with that same patient kindness in his eyes, but now there was something else too, a sadness that ran deep, like an old wound he carried quietly. "Mia," he said softly, like he didn't want to scare her away. "Do you remember anything from the fire?" Her whole body stiffened. The mention of the fire made her stomach twist into knots. She hadn't talked about that night in years, not since she'd told the police everything she could remember, which wasn't much. Smoke, flames, her mother screaming her name, the sharp sting of glass against her cheek as she climbed through the window. That was it. After that, she'd woken up in a hospital bed, alone and covered in bandages. "No one asks me about that," she whispered. "Why do you?" Keanu looked down at his hands, tracing the rim of his coffee cup with his finger. "Because you weren't alone that night." The words hit her like a slap. She felt the room tilt for a second. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. Keanu single quotes, eyes flicked to Sam, who was still lurking behind the kitchen door, pretending not to eavesdrop. "Could we talk somewhere private?" he asked. Mia hesitated, her mind spinning. This man, this movie star who just defended her from a pack of cruel strangers, was telling her there was something about her past she didn't know. It felt impossible, and yet, looking into his eyes, she knew he wasn't lying. She led him to the back storeroom, a tiny space filled with boxes of sugar packets and canned soup. There was barely enough room for both of them. The hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence as she waited for him to explain. Keanu took a deep breath, like he was steadying himself. "I was there that night, Mia, not in the house, but outside. I was shooting a movie in that neighborhood. We heard screaming, saw the smoke. The crew ran over to help. I pulled you out from under a fallen beam in the yard. You were so small, so brave. You kept asking for your mother." Her eyes widened. She felt her knees give out and leaned against a shelf to keep from falling. You saved me?" He nodded, his eyes shining with the memory. "I stayed with you until the ambulance came. You held my hand so tight. But you were in shock. You didn't speak much. They said you wouldn't remember." Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and silent. All these years she'd thought she'd survived alone. All these years she'd carried the weight of that night like a stone in her chest. Now, standing in this cramped storeroom, she realized a stranger had once risked his life for hers, and that stranger was standing in front of her again. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked. "Why didn't you find me?" Keanu's face clouded with regret. "I tried. I called the hospital, the shelter you went to after, but they wouldn't give me information. You were a minor. They wanted to protect you from the press, from stories that could hurt you more. And maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I thought you'd find your way." He paused, his voice breaking. "But when I saw you today, when I saw your scar, I knew you hadn't been seen in the way you deserved." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, breathing hard. "Why now? Why come here?" "I'm shooting a film nearby," he said. "I wanted coffee, a quiet place. I didn't know you'd be here, but maybe I did. Maybe something brought me back to you." Mia let out a shaky laugh, halfway between joy and disbelief. "This is crazy. I don't know what to say." Keanu stepped closer, careful not to touch her until she was ready. "You don't have to say anything, Mia. But I want you to know something. Your scar, it's not something to hide. It's a reminder that you lived, that you survived something that should have destroyed you. It's a mark of your strength, not your shame." Her shoulders shook as she tried to take in his words. All her life, people had mocked her, made her feel small and broken. But this man, this stranger who had once saved her, was telling her she was strong, that she was more than her pain. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the truth settle between them. Then Mia asked the question that had been burning in her chest. "Since he walked in, why does it still hurt so much? Not the scar, the way people look at me, talk about me. Why does it feel like I'm still stuck in that fire?" Keanu's eyes softened. He reached out, this time letting his hand rest gently on her shoulder. "Because healing isn't just about your skin, Mia. It's about forgiving yourself for surviving when others didn't. It's about seeing yourself the way the people who love you do. You're not stuck in that fire anymore. You just have to believe you deserve to step out of it." She felt something break open inside her, a part of her that had been locked away since she was 16. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, she felt like maybe she wasn't alone anymore. A knock on the storeroom door startled them both. Sam peeked in, looking awkward. "Sorry, but we've got more customers. I can cover your tables, Mia. If you need a minute." She took a deep breath and shook her head. "No, I'm okay." "Thank you, Sam." Keanu smiled at her, proud in a quiet way. "You ready?" he asked. Mia nodded. She didn't know what would come next, how the people in the diner would react when they realized who he really was, what they'd say when they saw him sitting with her. But for once, she didn't care. She was ready to step back into the world with her head held high. She walked out of the storeroom, with Keanu by her side, her scar catching the light from the neon sign outside. But this time, she didn't hide it. She let it shine, and somewhere deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning of a story she'd waited her whole life to hear. The diner buzzed with whispers when Mia and Keanu stepped back out of the storeroom. Word had spread fast. The group of young men who'd mocked her earlier were long gone. But the few customers who remained stole glances at Keanu, their eyes wide with disbelief. A mother nudged her teenage son to look. A tired truck driver pulled out his phone, pretending not to film. Mia felt the heat of all those stares, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she didn't drop her eyes to the floor or hide behind her braids. She stood tall beside Keanu, her scar visible in the glow of the flickering neon sign. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her mind, saying, "See, you're stronger than you think." Keanu walked her behind the counter again. He sat on a stool, not caring who recognized him now. Sam shuffled over from the kitchen, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. He poured a cup for Keanu, his hands trembling. Slightly. Never thought I'd see the day, Sam muttered with a half-smile. You're really him, huh? Keanu grinned. Some days, I'm not so sure myself. Sam's eyes flicked to Mia, full of quiet pride. He told you? He asked her. Mia nodded. Her voice was steadier now. He saved me. Sam shook his head in wonder, then went back to the kitchen, humming that same off-key tune. Mia almost laughed at how normal it all felt, this small, ordinary place where something extraordinary had just happened. But the peace didn't last long. The bell above the door jingled again, this time more forcefully. A woman in a crisp suit strode in, carrying a leather bag and a phone pressed to her ear. She paused when she saw Keanu sitting there, her eyes widening. Then she snapped the phone shut and marched straight up to him. Mr. Reeves, she said sharply, I've been looking for you everywhere. You're supposed to be on set in an hour. They've been calling me nonstop. Keanu's face stayed calm, but Mia saw a flicker of frustration behind his eyes. He glanced at Mia, then back at the woman. I'm not leaving yet. The woman, his assistant. Mia guessed, looked at her like she was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. This is important. We can't keep the whole crew waiting because you're playing hero in some greasy spoon diner. Mia's face flushed. She took a step back, her old instinct to hide flaring up again. She felt like a burden, an interruption to a life far bigger and shinier than hers. But Keanu's voice cut through the air, calm but firm. Don't talk about her like that. The woman scoffed. I'm just saying no, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. She's not just some waitress, she's Mia. She's the reason I'm still here. So if the crew needs to wait, they'll wait. The whole diner went quiet again. Mia's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. It had been years since anyone had stood up for her like that. Years since someone had made her feel like she mattered. The assistant huffed, tapping her phone impatiently. Fine, 10 more minutes. But then we're going. She stormed off, to wait by the door, muttering under her breath. Mia looked at Keanu, feeling something fragile and warm blooming in her chest. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. He shrugged, his eyes gentle again. I wanted to. People forget. Sometimes, the ones who look down on you usually look up to the wrong things. She thought about that as she refilled his coffee. The diner started to feel smaller, like the walls were pressing in. There was so much she wanted to ask him, but the words felt heavy in her mouth. Finally, she found the courage. What happens now? Keanu tilted his head. What do you mean? You're leaving, she said, her voice soft but steady. You'll go back to your set, your movies, your real life. What happens to me then? He looked at her for a long moment, like he was searching for the right answer deep inside himself. Mia, he said slowly, I can't pretend to know what the future looks like for you, but I can promise this, you're not alone anymore. If you ever need help, if you ever feel like the fire's closing in again, you call me. I'll be there. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to that promise like a lifeline. But the little voice in her head, the one that whispered she was nothing but a scarred girl in a forgotten diner, fought back. Why do you care so much? She asked. You don't even know me. Keanu reached across the counter, his hand warm as it closed around hers. I do know you, he said. You're the girl who wouldn't let go of my hand when you were surrounded by fire. You're the woman who walks in here every day and faces people who mock you, and you still pour their coffee with kindness. You're stronger than you think, and that means something to me. The warmth of his touch settled into her bones. She felt something loosen in her chest, a tiny seed of hope pushing through the ashes of her old fears. The assistant cleared her throat loudly by the door. Mr. Reeves, it's time. Keanu let go of her hand, but not her gaze. He slipped a small card across the counter, his contact information scribbled on it in his own messy handwriting. Don't lose this, he said, and don't lose yourself either. Mia tucked the card into her apron pocket like it was made of gold. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small for what she felt, so she just nodded, hoping he could see it in her eyes. Keanu stood up, gave Sam a grateful nod, and walked toward the door. He paused just before he stepped into the rain and looked back one last time. Take care, Mia. You've got more light in you than you know. Then he was gone. swallowed by the storm outside and the world waiting for him beyond the diner's flickering. Sign. Mia stood behind the counter, her fingers pressed to the card in her pocket, the warmth of his words lingering like a promise. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know how to face tomorrow or the people who would still whisper behind her back. But for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was more than her scar. Maybe she was a survivor with a story that wasn't done yet. And that small hope was enough to keep her standing tall as the rain poured down outside, washing the world clean for whatever came next. The days after Keanu walked out of the diner felt different, like the air around Mia had shifted. At first, she didn't know what to do with the tiny card in her pocket. Every night she'd pull it out, run her finger over the faded ink, and wonder if he really meant what he said. Did he truly want her to call? Or had he just felt sorry for her, like so many people before? But every morning, when she looked in the mirror, something inside her felt stronger. The scar was still there. It would always be there, but it didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. She caught herself holding her chin a little higher, letting people see her face without pulling her hair forward to hide the jagged line. That marked her survival. It didn't take long for the whispers to start in town. People who'd never looked at her twice now pointed when she passed by. Customers who once left crumbs and cold stares on their tables suddenly wanted to know if she really knew him. They'd lean over their coffee cups and ask, "So what's he like? Did he say anything about coming back?" Sometimes the questions hurt more than the mockery ever did. People didn't really care about her story. They cared about his. They wanted the gossip, the proof that someone famous had touched their forgotten little town. But not everyone was cruel. One rainy afternoon, when the lunch rush had ended, Sam shuffled out of the kitchen and sat across from Mia in an empty booth. He placed a chipped mug of tea in front of her, his old hands trembling just a bit. "You've changed, kid," he said, his voice rough like gravel but warm underneath. "Something in you's different now, not just because of him, because of you." Mia smiled, tracing circles on the table with her fingertip. "Maybe. I feel like I'm waking up for the first time. Like maybe I'm not broken." Sam grunted. "You were never broken. Scar doesn't mean you're less. Means you've got proof you fought back." She didn't say anything, but his words settled into her bones like a blanket on a cold night. Sometimes it surprised her how kindness could come from places she'd stopped expecting it. A week passed, then two. The card stayed tucked safe inside her apron pocket, close to her heart. She told herself she wouldn't call. What would she say anyway? He was a movie star, busy with sets and scripts and bright lights. She was just Mia, a waitress in a corner diner with burned memories and half-healed dreams. Then, one night, she closed up the diner alone. Sam had gone home early, complaining about his back. The rain outside fell in sheets, hammering the windows so hard she could barely see the streetlights. She gathered the tips from the tables, wiped down the counter, and pulled her coat tight around her shoulders. That's when she saw them. The same young men from that first day. They were standing by the window, huddled under the awning, their eyes dark and mean. They'd come back. Mia's heart pounded. She locked the door and ducked behind the counter, her breath shallow. She heard the tap of knuckles on the glass, then a muffled laugh. "Come on, Scarface," one of them called. "We know you're in there. You think he's gonna save you now? He's gone. You're still just you." Their words cut deeper than the cold. She pressed her back to the shelves, her fingers shaking. She thought about calling the police, but they'd be gone before anyone showed up. They knew it too, they always did. Her eyes fell on the card, Keanu's number, hidden in her pocket like a secret. She didn't want to bother him. She didn't want to be that girl who needed saving all over again. But as the men started banging on the door louder and louder, something inside her snapped. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then a warm, familiar voice answered. "Mia." She almost dropped the phone, her throat tight with panic. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. They're back. The ones from the diner. They're outside. I'm scared." Keanu's voice was calm, steady like a stone in a storm. "Are you alone?" "Yes, Sam's gone. The door's locked, but they're trying to get in." There was a pause. She could almost picture him running a hand through his. hair already figuring out what to do. Okay, listen to me. Stay where you are. Don't open that door. I'm calling someone I trust. They'll be there fast. I promise. Stay with me on the line, Mia. Don't hang up. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed the phone to her ear, so hard it hurt, needing his voice to drown out the banging and the cruel laughter from outside. Why do they hate me so much? She whispered. Why can't they just leave me alone? People fear what they don't understand, Keanu said gently, and you're stronger than they'll ever be. That scares them more than your scar ever could. She closed her eyes, his words sinking in even as fear made her hands go numb. She heard the men pounding on the glass again, calling her names, threatening her. But Keanu kept talking, about the fire, about survival, about how the world tries to break people who shine too bright. Minutes felt like hours until blue lights flashed through the rain. Sirens cut through the storm, making the men scatter into the night like rats. She heard car doors slam and voices bark orders. Someone knocked gently on the diner door. Miss Police, you're safe now. She peeked out from behind the counter, her body shaking. She unlocked the door for the officers, who led her outside to a waiting patrol car. She could hear Keanu's voice still on the line, soft and steady in her ear. I told you, Mia, you're not alone anymore. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. Mia sat in the back of the patrol car, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea an officer had given her. Rain still fell outside, but the storm in her chest felt different now, calmer, somehow. The young men who had terrorized her were gone, at least for tonight. She could see one of the officers taking her statement, his flashlight sweeping over the wet pavement. Everything looked so small through the rain-smeared window, like a scene in a movie she didn't quite believe she was living. She still had her phone pressed to her ear. Keanu's voice had been her anchor through the worst of it, a calm thread pulling her back every time fear threatened to swallow her whole. Mia? His voice was softer now. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? She shook her head, then remembered he couldn't see her. No, they didn't get in. The police came fast. Thank you. Thank you for believing me. She heard him exhale, relief, clear in the sound. You did the brave part. You called. You asked for help. That's not weakness, Mia, that's courage. His words wrapped around her like a blanket. For so long she'd believed asking for help made her less, like needing someone was the same as failing. But tonight, in the pouring rain, she realized maybe strength wasn't about surviving alone. Maybe it was about letting people in, letting them stand with you when the world turned dark. One of the officers tapped on the window. You got somewhere safe to go tonight? He asked kindly. Mia hesitated. She could go back to her tiny apartment above the laundromat, but part of her feared the young men would come looking for her again. She looked down at her phone. Keanu, I don't want to be a problem, but I don't feel safe going home. You're not a problem, he said immediately. I'm sending a car for you. A friend of mine, a driver I trust, will take you to a hotel. It's nice, safe, quiet. I'll cover everything. You'll rest there tonight, okay? Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they were warm, not cold. Why are you so kind to me? She whispered. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, he said, his voice gentle and true. But sometimes life gives us second chances to do the right thing. I didn't protect you enough when you were a girl. I won't fail you now. A sleek black car pulled up beside the police cruiser not long after. A driver in a suit stepped out, holding an umbrella over her as he guided her to the warm back seat. She kept the phone to her ear the whole time, listening to Keanu talk about the stars hidden behind the rain clouds, about how storms never last forever. When she got to the hotel, the driver walked her inside. The lobby was soft and golden, the air smelling of fresh flowers and clean sheets, a world so different from her drafty apartment and the greasy diner. The woman at the front desk greeted her with a warm smile, like she already knew who Mia was and why she was there. Mr. Reeves said you're to have whatever you need, the woman said kindly. This room is yours for as long as you want. We'll take care of you tonight. Mia stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. She leaned against it for a moment, breathing in the quiet. The bed was huge and soft, the pillows stacked high. A plate of fresh fruit and a kettle for tea sat on the table. She could see the city lights flickering outside the window, each one like a tiny promise that the darkness wouldn't last forever. When she finally lay down, she kept the phone next to her ear. "Keanu," she said softly, her eyelids heavy. "What if they come back? What if I can't do this?" His answer came without hesitation. "Then you call me, and you keep calling me until you believe you're worth more than their hate. Because you are, Mia. You always have been." She fell asleep like that, the sound of his steady breathing on the other end of the line like a lullaby. She'd been waiting for since she was 16 and climbed out of the fire alone. The next morning, she woke up before dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. For a moment, she just lay there, feeling the warmth of the blankets, the softness of the pillow under her scarred cheek. She found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the harsh hotel lights showing every detail of the scar that had defined her for so long. But today, it looked different. Today, it looked like proof that she had survived. Not something to hide, but something to honor. Later that morning, there was a knock on her hotel room door. She opened it to find a woman standing there, older than Mia, but with the same tired kindness in her eyes that Sam carried. She wore a simple suit and carried a folder tucked under her arm. "Hi, Mia," the woman said gently. "My name is Ruth. Keanu sent me. He thought you might want someone to talk to, someone who can help you find your next step." Mia's first instinct was to shut the door, to retreat into her old fear. But instead, she stepped back and let Ruth in. They sat by the window, the city waking up below them, and talked for hours about the fire, about the years that followed, about the men who mocked her, and the small voice that still told her she wasn't enough. Ruth listened, really listened. Without pity or fake kindness, she offered ideas, therapy, support groups, even ways to build skills so Mia could find work beyond the diner if she wanted. For the first time, Mia saw a door opening. Maybe she didn't have to stand behind a counter pouring coffee for people who laughed behind her back. Maybe she could dream a little bigger. By the time Ruth left, Mia felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child, hope that didn't feel like a lie. She picked up her phone, hands trembling, and called Keanu again. When he answered, she found herself laughing through tears. "You keep saving me," she said. His warm chuckle made her smile. "No, Mia, you're saving yourself. I'm just standing where you can see me when you need it." And for the first time, she believed that maybe she really was strong enough to stand on her own scar. And all a week passed at the hotel. Every day, Mia woke before dawn, watching the city lights flicker out one by one as the sun rose. Every morning felt like a new page in a book she'd thought was already written for her. A book full of burned pages and dark corners. Now, the pages were blank, waiting for her to choose the words. She spent hours talking with Ruth. They'd sit by the big window, sipping tea while Ruth helped her untangle the knots in her past. They talked about the fire, about the day Keanu saved her, about the years she spent behind that diner counter trying to pretend she didn't care when people whispered and laughed. Ruth didn't push her to forget the pain. Instead, she helped Mia see it for what it was, proof that she could keep moving forward, no matter how bad the burn. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, Keanu came to visit. Mia was nervous, pacing the room, her hands sweating as she heard the soft knock at the door. When she opened it, he stood there with the same calm warmth in his eyes, eyes that told her she wasn't alone. No matter how far he traveled or how busy his world became, they sat on the balcony, the city buzzing far below them. He listened as she told him about the young men being caught by the police, about how they confessed to harassing her and others too. She spoke about Ruth's plans, about therapy, about learning new skills, maybe even about going back to school one day. Each word felt like she was setting down stones to build a new path. Once she got to choose this time, "It still scares me," Mia said softly. "What if I can't do it? What if I fall back into the old way of hiding and pretending?" Keanu looked out at the skyline, the last light of day glinting off the tall buildings like tiny fires in the distance. "Mia," he said gently, "the people who survive the worst things, they don't do it because they're never afraid. They do it because they stand up even when they're shaking. fear is not the end. It's the sign you're about to step into something bigger. She thought about that, her hand drifting to the scar on her cheek. For years, she'd believed this mark was her prison. Now, sitting here with the man who pulled her from the fire so long ago, she felt it like a badge, raw and real and earned. I used to think no one would ever see me as more than this, she said, tracing the line with her fingertip. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about what they see. Maybe it's about what I see. Keanu smiled. Exactly. And I see someone strong, kind, and braver than she knows. They sat in a comfortable silence for a while. The sounds of the city rose up to meet them, horns honking, laughter drifting from nearby streets, the steady hum of life moving forward. It all felt softer now, like the world was finally ready to give her space to grow. Before he left, Keanu stood and faced her. Mia, I'm not going to disappear this time. I want you to promise me something when things get heavy again. When that old voice tries to drag you back, you call me. You don't have to carry it alone. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And what about you? You always carry so much for everyone else. Who do you call when it gets heavy? His smile widened, just a bit sad but full of hope. Maybe I'll call you. She laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place inside her she'd thought was gone. Deal. After he left, Mia stood on the balcony for a long time. She watched the city lights blink like stars, each one reminding her of every moment she'd almost given up but didn't. She thought about her mother, about the fire, the pain, the loneliness that came after. She thought about the boys who mocked her and the people who looked right through her. They were just parts of her story. They weren't the ending. Weeks later, Mia packed her things and checked out of the hotel. She didn't go back to her tiny apartment above the laundromat. Instead, she moved into a small, clean studio on the edge of the city, a place with a window that caught the morning light and a lock that made her feel safe. Sam visited her on his day off from the diner, carrying a bag of groceries and an old radio that still played scratchy jazz songs. They sat together on the floor, eating cheap takeout and laughing about nothing, when the new diner opened on Main Street. The owner, a woman who'd heard about Mia's story, offered her a job as a shift manager. It was a small thing, but to Mia, it felt huge. People still stared at her scar, but now, she met their eyes without shame. Sometimes they asked about it, and sometimes she told them the truth. It's just part of how I got here. She kept Keanu's number in her phone, but she didn't have to use it much. They still called each other sometimes, short talks about the day, the weather, the dreams she was building piece by piece. He sent her books to read and little handwritten notes that said things like, remember who you are and the fire didn't break you. It made you. One night, alone in her apartment, Mia stood in front of the mirror. She tucked her hair behind her ear, letting the scar catch the soft lamplight. She touched the glass, her reflection clear and steady. I see you, she whispered to herself, and I'm not hiding anymore. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a scarred girl trying to survive a world that mocked her. She felt like a woman who had walked through the fire and come out the other side, strong, seen, and beautifully whole.